Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of High Energy Girl. And today's amazing guest is Ashley Bernardi. Ashley suffered from Lyme disease that went undiagnosed for quite a long time. She got very, very sick, but in doing this, she was able to heal from a traumatic experience of her dad's passing 20 years prior. She wrote an awesome book that can help everyone heal their body from the emotional and mental trauma that they've experienced and held in. She also has a podcast called Two Girls Talking. And we just had such an authentic conversation. I cannot wait for you to meet Ashley. Hey everyone, welcome to High Energy Girl, a podcast helping women to age stronger because it is never too late to get fit, be strong, and feel sexy. I'm your host, Tracy Gluhide, health coach and personal trainer and founder of highenergygirl.com. Each week, we will either have a guest interview, which will provide you encouragement or an actionable tip to help you age stronger, or I will do a solo episode. Please also join our awesome Facebook group called High Energy Girls, and I'm looking forward to see you on the inside of that group and hope you enjoy today's show. Sleep is completely underrated, and so many women our age struggle with a really solid night's sleep. You want to know how I fixed it for me? Well, one of the things I did was I got a chili pad because I was always too hot and I'd be like tangled up in my covers, kicking them off, pulling them on. I could never find that sweet spot temperature, you know, the whole Goldilocks thing, too hot, too cold. And then I got a chili pad. My husband has his own control. I have mine, so I keep mine way cooler than he likes it. I'm never overly hot anymore. It is fabulous. And I even use it all winter long because you can adjust the thermostat any way you like. And I really love the white noise, the little hum that it plays. So the Chili Pad company, which is called Chili Sleep, has lots of amazing new products. They have pillows, bed sheets, weighted blankets, and the old-fashioned mattress protector chili pad that I have. It is amazing. So for a special discount price, head on over to bit.ly/chillsleep, CHILLSLEEP, and you will be thanking me later. Hey, Ashley, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Tracy, for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm happy to meet you, doll. So for the listeners that don't know you yet, why don't you just tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yes. I mean, gosh, whenever someone says, tell me about yourself, it's such a loaded question. I mean, I can start with the who I am today, but I think that there's a big story behind that we'll get into. Today I am a spiritually aligned, present soul who has been on a healing journey for a long time. Today I am healthy. I am vibrant. I know my purpose. I know my calling. I move my body in ways that feel good. I exercise, I sleep, I limit my stress. I'm a mom to 3 young kids and an entrepreneur and also an author of the new book, Authentic Power. Give Yourself Permission to Feel, which is all about my healing journey of, basically going from near death to where I am today, having just finished a half marathon a couple weeks ago. So hopefully here today to inspire your audience that healing is possible.
Well, that is scary. And really quick before I just open up that can of worms, where are you located right now? Where do you live?
Yeah, I live right outside Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia.
Oh, okay. I've never been to that area. So tell me, what do you mean by near-death experience? That's scary.
Gosh. Okay. Well, I think several years ago, I had experienced a health crisis that it was a mystery illness that left me completely bedridden. But I'm actually going to back up 20 years before that, because there was even something that I believe triggered that health crisis. So let me start there, if that's okay.
Perfect.
And, so I grew up in a military house. My father was an Army colonel. I was born in Schweinfurt, Germany, had the privilege and honor to live in various places across the country. But we moved here to Washington, D.C., so he could work at the Pentagon when I was a child. And we had a great life here, mom, dad, little sister, stable family, loving parents. And there was a Sunday night where we were all watching a family movie, and he was tired that evening after the movie. And I remember he went upstairs to go to bed, and I kissed my dad goodnight. And the last words I said to him were, "I love you, Dad." And he said, "I love you too, honey." And that was it. And moments later, he started actively suffering from a heart attack, which we didn't know what it was at the time. And my mom and my 9-year-old sister ran to give him CPR, and I ran to call 911. And the three of us tried to save his life. It was a heroic, tragic, scary effort. But unfortunately, what we learned was there was nothing that we could do. He passed away that night. And I lived with the guilt and the shame that I didn't do enough. I didn't call 911 fast enough. I didn't go and get the neighbors quick enough. And so after his death, it was a shock. Anyone who deals with a death, it's a shock, especially a sudden death, and especially a death in the way that I experienced, which is like basically right in front of us. It was so traumatic that I just did not even want to acknowledge it. Like, my dad, my best friend, my playmate was gone, but it was too hard for me to feel. So I didn't. And what I did instead was, I mean, I think society did this. I'm saying like it's not society's fault, but I went back to school a week later, and at the urging of grief counselors, people told my mom, put her back in school, let's get her back to normal. But of course, when you're 11 years old, you just lose your dad in front of you. Nothing is ever going to be normal again. The world as you know it is completely abnormal and upside down. And I decided that it was just easier to try to act normal and bury my true feelings and emotions than to address my grief and my shame and everything else. I mean, those emotions were messy and uncomfortable, and I put on this mask of strength. Also, growing up in a military family, you're told to be strong and brave. So I think that also had something to do with it too. And I acted like everything was okay on the outside. And on the outside, I became an Oscar-worthy actress that everything looked okay. So I continued to grow up. And as an example, I mean, you would look at me and I was secretary of my class in high school. I was captain of my high school dance team. I was president of my college sorority. I was an editor of my college newspaper. I mean, I had these on paper accolades. It's like, oh, Ashley looks like she really has her shit together. The reality is I didn't. I was just dying inside. I mean, this is what happens when you bury your emotions. It comes out in other ways. It comes out in people pleasing, lack of boundaries, and dishonesty. I was lying to myself and to others, destructive relationships, destructive relationship with alcohol. I could go on and on and on about how burying my emotions affected me negatively. And I lived like this, like, for a very long time. I got a job at CBS News after college and worked in New York City. I worked like a maniac. I had a work addiction. I loved my job, but I did everything that I could to not feel my real feelings. So what did I do? I kept busy all the time, busy. Because once I sat to pause, I got uncomfortable, and that's when things started bubbling up. So it wasn't until I was in my early 30s when a health crisis hit me over my head, knocked me off my feet, and forced me to get still and quiet. And at the time, I had just delivered my third baby. So I was married in my mid-20s. We have a happy marriage, then three healthy kids. But after I delivered my third child, these these mystery symptoms started coming on with a vengeance. I lost my vision. I couldn't see. My body went completely numb. I could not eat anything. I lost all my baby weight in like record amount of time. Like as an example, I'm 5'7". I got down to 110 pounds. It was so unhealthy, and I couldn't understand why I was having dizzy spells. I had no energy. I had so much pain in my body, like just chronic nerve pain. And no one could figure it out. I was looking for answers everywhere. I was like, oh, it might be fibromyalgia. It might be chronic fatigue. I was diagnosed also on top of this mystery illness with postpartum depression. So like, it's like, okay, universe, hit me while I'm down, hit me further. I was put in a part-time mental health hospitalization program to address my postpartum depression. And I will never forget, it was like the first time in my life that I was so sick. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't care for my children. My husband had to take the kids to his parents' house because I was completely incapacitated, could not move. And it was the first time in my life that I got quiet and still. And what I found was that feelings from 20 plus years ago started bubbling up. I was grieving for my health, but suddenly I was also missing my dad 20 something years later. And I started to grieve for him. And this was the first time in my life that I gave myself permission to feel those feelings. Truly, it's because the universe forced me to. Like, this was now like a gift that I can say it was a gift. And that's when the healing happened. So I'll say this, like, I eventually got diagnosed with Lyme disease after 30 doctors. This is not an exaggeration. I have seen every single doctor, from gastroenterologists, internal medicine, infectious disease doctors, naturopaths, you name it, medical intuitives. I was on the merry-go-round of doctors, and finally was diagnosed with late stage Lyme disease, encephalitis in my brain, like completely gone. They didn't know if they were going to be able to bring me back. I got a PICC line installed into my arm for to have IV antibiotics to my heart, and had that for 8 weeks. We moved in with my in-laws because when you have a PICC line in, you can't pick anything up. So I couldn't pick my babies up. And I slowly started healing, but I always tell people that the physical healing of this journey was only 20% of what needed to happen. The 80% of it was the spiritual, emotional, mental healing that needed to happen. And it started by giving myself permission to feel. And when I found that when I got quiet, when I got still, when I listened to that inner voice and that inner wisdom inside me and allowed myself to feel anything that came up, that's where I found my power. And I call that my authentic power. It's that wisdom. It's that divine wisdom that I have within me. And it was telling me to feel. And so I did. And for the next year, I moved through grieving for my father. And in many ways, I still am. And the pandemic struck that again for me and for so many people, because it was a collective trauma. But now I come to you today after this wild health journey, completely healed, a completely different person than I was 6 years ago when I was dying and nearly bedridden. And it started with knowing that healing for me was an inside job, but I always thought I needed the outside validation, the outside doctor, that voice of God to tell me that one magic elixir to help me heal my life, that it really was just going to start with me. It was that simple. And here I am today sharing that with you.
That is incredible and emotional. I mean, you got me emotional. So I want to talk quickly about the Lyme, and then I really want to go and talk about the other 80%. Why was it so hard to diagnose Lyme?
Thank you for asking that question. I get emotional about that question, because I think there's a couple things. I think, and this is what I've learned in conventional medicine, that women are dismissed. And so first I wasn't listened to. So why did it take so long? It's because doctors looked at me and said, oh, you just delivered your third baby? You're just stressed. You need a psychiatrist. I can't tell you how many doctors told me I needed to see a psychiatrist. And I was like, I know. Actually, I'm in a mental health hospital right now. It's not that. Like, I am physically ill. So the first issue was I wasn't listened to, which I found was just very interesting. I'll say this. When I brought my husband with me to appointments, that male in the room, I got listened to more than I did just by myself, which is very frustrating to even tell you, but this is just an observation that I made. So one is being listened to. Two, the testing for Lyme disease has a long way to go. There's a Western blot test, which is supposed to tell you if you've had Lyme or not, but it is not reliable, I learned. I had like Lyme titers show up a little bit on that, but not enough to indicate Lyme disease. There's other testing that can be done too, but really what I learned is that 60% of people who get bit by a tick, Lyme disease is caused from a bacteria in a tick. And that 60% of people do not get that bullseye that you think you get. So the other issue is I would go see doctors, and I would, like, me being, I'm a former journalist, so I'd be like, can you look for Lyme? And they're like, well, did you have a bullseye? No bullseye. So they'd be like, no, it's not Lyme disease. So I'd be written off for that. So I just think there's a lot more to be done for Lyme disease research. There's advocacy that needs to be done. I will always be very outspoken about that, but even more so, I think that women need to be listened to more. And I learned that you need to be an advocate for yourself in the doctor's office. And if you feel like you can't do that alone, bring someone to be an advocate with you. I found that bringing my mom or my husband was very, very helpful, because if you're not feeling good and you're feeling sick and your brain doesn't feel like it's working and mine wasn't, you have someone who can be your voice. In the same way that when you take your child to a doctor's office, you're your child's advocate. They can't speak, so you speak for them. So bring an advocate with you. So those are just a couple things, and I could go on and on and on about this, but I'll stop myself there.
So did you actually see the tick that bit you?
No, I just got really sick one night. I will never forget. It was a night in June of 2014 that I suddenly felt like I had the flu come over me. And it was a flu that never went away and just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then when I got pregnant, it got better, because your immune system shuts down when you get pregnant. And then the moment I delivered my third child, boom, it was there the entire time. And that's when it went really downhill.
Wow. And is that communicable to the child?
It could be. It has not been. She's 6 years old and is so healthy and vibrant and healthy, but it's something that is always in the back of my mind that I watch. But as of now, there are no concerns. I've heard stories where that has happened, but in my healing work that I've done, I've learned that I need to just stay in my tunnel vision and keep the energy focused on me and Scarlett. And Scarlett's my 6-year-old. Scarlett is healthy and leaves no indication right now that she has been impacted by this. Therefore, there's no reason to go and research it and spend that energy on that, knowing that she is that healthy. So yes, it's always a possibility, but it's something that we haven't seen. And so we live with the idea that she is fine. She's free, and I am healed, and which is a beautiful way to live.
Yeah. Oh, that's the only way. Right. Yeah. It's like we want to focus on what we desire, not the absence of it.
Exactly. So I just don't even go there.
Yeah. I just was curious if that could communicate. I got bit by a tick. I was in Minnesota on a business trip, and I woke up in the morning and I was just putting my workout clothes on, and in the mirror, I could see a dark spot on my lower abdomen. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And I just went to go fluff it off like it was lint or something. I didn't know what, and it didn't move. And then I was like, oh my gosh. At first I didn't know what the hell it was, but I looked closer, and I can't see worth a shit. I'm 56 years old, but I looked closer, and then finally I got like a washcloth or something, and I just picked it like this and yanked it out, and it was a freaking tick.
Wow.
And I had like a baggie because of my vitamins, and I stuck it in the baggie so I could, go and check it out. But they told me, they gave me an antibiotic right away and something else. And they said I should be fine. And that was maybe 3 years ago or so. But still, what a freaky feeling.
Yeah, it's really freaky. And it is alarming for that to happen, like for you, because I'm not the only one, I'm sure, that of someone who has gotten extremely sick from Lyme. And if left unaddressed, can cause debilitating symptoms that drastically impact your quality of life. So it's amazing that I'm so glad that you're okay. But for anyone who ever gets a tick, like save that tick, get it checked out. I would say like go to your doctor and like see what they say on recommendations for getting you doxycycline, which is the antibiotic that they would give you early on. For me, my Lyme was so late stage. They gave me IV Rocephin, which is what they give to meningitis patients. I had IV Rocephin for 8 weeks going in my blood and in my veins, which completely changed the my stomach, like the bacteria in my stomach. I looked like a different person because, of course, long-term antibiotics are so bad for you too. But at that point, it's what I needed to kill this bacteria, and it worked. It worked, but like I said, that was 20% of what needed to happen. I believe that Lyme disease was the trigger for everything else, that trauma that I had been bearing. And yes, if you bury trauma and hold on to it, it comes out in other ways. So Lyme disease made my symptoms worse. Would they not have been as worse if perhaps I had learned to move through my feelings and trauma? Yeah, I believe so. I believe for sure, yes. But I think that Lyme disease triggered that downward spiral of my body not being able to hold it in anymore because I had been holding it in forever.
Yeah, emotions. So let's talk about that, because I happen to be one that is like what you were describing, that I'm like really stoic and just kind of flat as far as like emotions. But my husband will be watching, his favorite show is, oh crap, what's the one with Tom Selleck? Blue Bloods. He loves Blue Bloods. And every single episode he is crying. And I'm just like, I never do. And I'm just like, and my dad died at the end of February 2020. And the way I found out was my stepsister sent me a text message, which I thought was the biggest bullshit thing ever. And then I called and nobody answered. And yeah. So anyways, but I feel like that I didn't really properly grieve either. So let's talk all about that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for that. I mean, that's a recent loss of your father, and to be told in that way is certainly less than ideal. I mean, I don't think there's any right way to be told that the passing of someone so significant to you. I mean, it's the hardest thing, but in a text message is also just borderline inappropriate. And that must have been so hard for you. But yeah, actually, like in February 2020, this was a month before the pandemic, right? Like before the world turned upside down. That is when I was called to write this book, because I felt those familiar feelings of grief, of sadness, of anger, of confusion, of despair start bubbling up again. And I was like, oh, hello, welcome back, all these familiar feelings. This time I knew what to do though. I was like, no, you guys are not being buried down this time. I know what happens when I bury my emotions. It's not happening this time. Instead, I allowed myself to move through them. I mean, I had lost a friend. We had sick relatives. It was a very scary time for all of us. It was a collective trauma. So I gave myself permission. I moved through these feelings in real time. I felt you know, like, I think that there were like pandemic thrivers. I think I was one of them because I just, even though it was very difficult, I allowed myself to just feel everything that was coming. And then I started writing about it. And then in a meditation, I was called to write a book about it because my fear was that as we go through this collective trauma as a society, that we're going to bury all of the emotions that we felt these past 2 years, loss from a loved one, even loss of, you know, socialization, loss of education. There was so much loss, right? We were isolated. There was loneliness. If we don't give ourselves permission to move through these really uncomfortable traumatic feelings, then on the other end of this pandemic, my fear was that people would end up like how I ended up, because what happens when you bury your trauma and emotions, it's going to come out in other ways. It might not come out physically yet, but years later, it also might, but it also could come out in ways that would confuse yourself or confuse others. So my message to people is to find safe and loving ways to support yourself to move through these uncomfortable feelings and emotions. What I've learned is that all emotions are here for a reason. We experience happiness, joy, elation, and we allow ourselves to laugh when we think of something funny. But in the same way, when you're angry and you're frustrated and you're sad, give yourself space to move through that. And I'm not saying like wallow in it, but like take some time to notice what's coming up and get curious about why it might be. Where is it showing up in your body? And breathing through it and processing it and seeing the lesson in that emotion, because I think all emotions have lessons too. So that is why I was called to write Authentic Power, Give Yourself Permission to Feel. And my hope is that as we come out of this, hopefully come out of this pandemic, that the tools that I teach in my book, and plus with the interviews that I've conducted, over 20 interviews in my book with incredible healing experts from doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists, about really what it takes for us to move through our emotions in a healthy way.
Wow. So how did you actually realize that that's what 80% of your problem was when you were recovering?
That's a great question, because I had tried all of the physical things first, including the IV antibiotics. And I like every single supplement, every single physical thing that I thought I could heal. And then I stumbled across, like, I think like it was very serendipitous, but I was reading Allie Hilfiger's book, Bite Me, who was Tommy Hilfiger's daughter, who also suffered from Lyme disease. And she, in her book, wrote about like the law of attraction and focus wheels. And I started getting very curious about that. And that opened up the door to me for spiritual enlightenment, healing, manifestation, getting curious about my emotions, which, you know, when I felt the grief, I allowed it to start bubbling up. And so, as you know, I'm sure, and your audience can relate, like once you open that door for like spiritual learning, like it's like I can't get enough now. And so that's where I found that the longer I went, it was like, oh my God, this isn't like a medicine. This isn't a job for medicine to heal. This is a job for Ashley to heal. And it's a journey. And so that's when I had that realization, is by starting to read her book, learning about the law of attraction, getting really, really curious about it, going down that path, and just continuing to explore it to this day.
It's so fun. Like, so, you know, Abraham Hicks, I take it.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, we saw them. A group of us girls up here saw them in San Francisco in February of 2020. And
wow.
I know we were like in the third row. It was just magical. So fun.
I would love to experience that. And I mean, interesting that was February 2020. And that was also the same month your father passed away too.
Yeah, this was about 2 weeks prior.
Wow.
It was crazy. We saw Abraham Hicks. Then my husband and I went on our 30th anniversary trip. Amazing first class trip to the Bahamas. Come home 2 days later, my dad passes. It was just like, whoa, what the hell just happened?
Wow.
So, but I like what you said about that, because so many people are closed off to the concept of anything beyond the physicality, the chemical. Like a traditional doctor looks at physical and chemical, but they don't look at the energetic, which I would call like the quantum level, which our entire existence is moving to quantum.
Absolutely.
And it's like, but the doctors don't address that. And I don't blame them. They just weren't taught that way.
They weren't trained to think like that. And especially here in Western medicine, where we are, doctors are trained to put a Band-Aid on the problem. And that's what I found not to be true for my healing, that I needed to first get to the root of the problem. And the root of my problem was that, and it was an energetic problem and a feeling problem and an emotional problem, was that I wasn't giving myself permission to feel. I wasn't being honest with myself. I didn't know who I was. I wasn't being honest with others, and I wasn't giving myself permission to feel all the emotions that is our God-given birthright to feel. Like, there's a reason why we have tears and anger and grief. Like, there's reasons for that. There's lessons in that. There's love in that. And that's the paradigm that I want to shift. That's the conversation that I want to shift, that it's okay to move through these. You don't need to wallow in them. You don't need to stay there. And I always say, like, for sure, get professional help if you are feeling depressed for a long period of time. I have been there. I know I've gotten the professional help. But if you allow yourself to move through your emotions in real time, and even if it's not real time, but like years later and in a safe and loving way, you will find profound healing and curiosity and enlightenment.
And I want to address the practical application of all of that in just one sec. I just want to mention, because you said you've interviewed all these psychologists and different people in that space. And there was a girl on my show, a woman named Adele Spragon. And I don't know if her episode has aired yet, but she talks about patterns in your brain. And I think that you might want to talk to her on your show. I'll connect you guys.
I'd love to talk to her.
Super, super interesting. She's had 30 years of experience. And this method of what she does to work with people, two things. Number one, it was like Esther Hicks. You know how Esther Hicks got started with automatic writing?
Yep.
Like writing in the air, right?
Yeah.
That's what happened to Adele. She was healing all these patients, or, helping patients and all that. But inside she was feeling broken. She had like anxiety and just different issues, which you'll hear on her interview if you listen. And all of a sudden she goes to her journal one day and she's just like, why? And all of a sudden that pen was moving. And she said that some of those words, she didn't even know what they meant. She had to look them up.
Wow.
And that's how her program that she uses to help people was created. It was all like automatic writing, like a spiritual download.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're mentioning this, because I actually I don't call it automatic writing. I talk about this in my book. I call it sacred writing, which is a huge part of my healing journey. I was taught about this through my spiritual mentor, Leanne Taylor, who you should also have on your show. She wrote one of my favorite books ever called The Fragile Face of God. She has 5 children, 3 of which have Fragile X syndrome, which is like the worst form of autism, non-speaking, non-verbal. But anyway, so she is a spiritual communicator and taught me about the power of sacred writing. And it's the same thing. It's essentially just asking you can say God, the universe, the divine, your spirit, your guides, a question, and you just see what happens. And it's weird at first. You're like, oh my God, but it is so powerful, because you look back at it and you're like, did I write that? There's no way I wrote that. But you're getting messages from your soul, from perhaps from the beyond. And so it's a very, very powerful tool that I have even used in my own healing journey.
What's the name of that book?
The Fragile Face of God. Her name is Leanne Taylor.
Okay. I need to develop that practice. And I've heard it now from so many people that it's like, okay, Tracy, hello, when are you going to listen?
Tracy, you'll love it. It's so powerful. And I will connect you with Leanne if you'd like, because she is just amazing. And I've even gone through her courses. So she'll have like live courses where we go through like just spiritual mentorship, and it's just so beautiful and very otherworldly and beyond. Like I never thought it's like, some people will be like, oh my God, this is so woo woo. But for me, it feels so right. Like it makes so much sense. And I feel like it would for you too.
Well, and I think that the reason people feel that way is because they've been conditioned and programmed to feel that way. Like everything with most people is 3D, right?
Yeah.
They don't think about other densities, that there's more than meets the eye, because they have been conditioned via media, no offense. But the news, the education system, all of these are meant to keep us in this little box.
Yeah.
And not tapped into spirit. Like the whole use of fluoride in city water and toothpaste. Yep. You know, that calcifies your pineal gland, which I say it's your antenna to the spirit world. Mm-hmm. So I think that's on purpose, Ashley.
I agree. I know, I'm with you right there. And 6 years ago, I would have been like, this is a crazy conversation to be having. But where I am now, I'm like, no way. I mean, my sacred writing, I have journals everywhere, but like every single day I do it. And it is, I get so many incredible downloads, insights, wisdom. It's just, if anyone tries it, you will find ways to heal your life. Like I have, for me at least. And so I would recommend just trying it and then keep going. If you're like unsure, keep going, keep writing.
How much time do you spend doing that every day?
It depends. Honestly, like some days I'm like writing and I have 5 minutes because my kids are sitting all over me and we got to get to the bus stop. Other days, if it's like after the bus stop, I have 30 minutes. It can take as little, or like, this is the beauty of this. Like, it doesn't need to take an hour. And this is like, while I also say that, like, since we're talking about time, you know, when I say like move through your feelings, I have this whole framework called the feel framework. And everyone's always like, well, how much time? Everyone's so focused on time. I'm like, it can take you 30 seconds. Like, just, you need to sit and pause and acknowledge that feeling is even there. And then ask yourself, like, what is this feeling here to teach me in this moment? And then let it go. Like, and see how you feel after. You'll feel so much lighter. So it doesn't need to take 30 seconds. It doesn't need to take any time. But just make like a little bit of time. Start with 1 minute. It's how I started meditating. When I started meditating, of course, it was in my health crisis when I was going through my spiritual awakening. I could not meditate for 10 seconds. Tracy, I could not sit for a minute in my old life. It was so excruciating and uncomfortable for me. But it's a practice, right? Meditation is a practice. So you sit for 30 seconds, and then the next week you bump it up to 45 seconds. And then the next week you bump it up to a minute. And now if I wanted to, I could meditate for 2 hours and love every moment of it.
That's beautiful. And you just reminded me of something. I just took an advanced intuition class last week. And yeah, I have this amazing teacher. She's actually local. The coolest thing is when my dad died, he came to our session together and told her things that I didn't even know. And then I found out the truth on ancestry.com.
Stop.
I kid you not.
I want your advanced intuitive teacher, please.
Okay. So send me an email, tracy@highenergygirl.com. And then I'll forward you over Adele and Dawn's stuff. But great. Yeah, no, she's pretty awesome. Okay. I know you have to go get your kids. So I want to talk about practical application tips that the listeners can, like, what's your first suggestion of how they can, experience the benefits you have?
Okay, I have so many. Let me start here. This was, if anyone is going through a healing journey or a health crisis or just a difficult time, the first thing I'd like to say is just reminding yourself that this time and this moment is temporary. When I was going through the throes of Lyme disease, I used to feel like it was never going to get better, like it was going to last forever. But then I started telling myself, of course, like learning about law of attraction, that this is temporary. This moment's not going to last forever. I'm not going to feel like this forever. And then I invited healing into my life. But one affirmation I have for just any difficult or hard times is just, this is temporary. This is a temporary moment. That just gives yourself permission to be in that moment and to move through it in a safe way. So that's one of my first things. Something else that was taught to me by Dr. Jamie Hope, who is an ER physician who I interviewed for my book. And she is a physician at the level 1 trauma center in Detroit, which is one of the busiest trauma centers in the country. And she talks about how we're primal beings. Like when you have a child crying, that's a primal emotion, right? But we tell our kids to stop crying. Don't cry, don't cry. Everything's fine. And I think that this is really backwards now in hindsight, where I tell my kids now, like, you're moving through something that doesn't feel comfortable for you. And that is okay, giving them permission to cry. So it's a primal emotion. And so Dr. Hope teaches that we need to get back to our primal roots here and give ourselves permission to, if we're going to feel like we're going to cry. Don't hold it in. We hold so much in as a society. Everything is so marketable on Instagram. Our lives are so perfect. We're not authentic in the way that we market ourselves, but in our lives, not all roses and butterflies every day. So she recommends having a stress hard toolkit and a stress soft toolkit for in those times when you're feeling that you are stressed, you're overwhelmed, you're angry, whatever it is. Your stress hard toolkit could look like this. She recommends something called dish therapy. And this is amazing, satisfying therapy, which, full disclaimer, I haven't tried it, but I've had dishes ready to go for a very long time. I just need a moment to be angry enough to do it. You go and get a trash can outside, you take some old dishes, you put some safety glasses on, and you slam dishes into the trash can. And it's just a way to physically get your aggression, your anger, whatever it is, out. And Dr. Hope is like, this is the most satisfying thing you will ever do. And if that feels weird for you, there's other ways that you can stress hard. You could go on Amazon and get a damn it doll. If you look it up, there's things called a damn it doll, where you can just whack a doll against your wall and just get that aggression out. Now, for other people, there's things like kickboxing. For me, it's running. I'm an avid runner these days, but just getting that aggression out in a way that feels physically good for your body. But then if you're not feeling in that way, and you're like, oh my God, dish therapy sounds crazy, there's also things called a stress soft toolkit, which is your own toolkit that you can create that allows you to sit in your whatever feeling that you're feeling. And it could be breath work, it could be yoga, it could be meditation, it could be breathing through it, sitting in silence. That's your stress soft toolkit. It could be getting a massage, it could be taking a nap, whatever that is, and having those toolkits. So in my book, I have a place where you can read about Dr. Hope's recommendations, and then have a place for you to journal ideas to get your own stress releasing toolkits for the next time the universe throws you a curveball. So that's in my chapter, Get Primal with Your Meltdowns. So that's one tip that's really worked well for me to help me address emotions in real time. And I'll say this, when I was, even during the pandemic, I went through a breathwork course, and at the end of the course, at the end of the session, the facilitator was like, okay, I want you to let out the loudest scream that you can. And if you're going to do this, warn your family members or anyone that listens to you. I can't tell you how satisfying it felt to just scream. I had been holding this scream in my body. And I think it was like, of course, the stress of the pandemic, having kids at home, virtual learning. When I let out that scream, I felt like a million weights had been lifted off me for the rest of the week. So just getting curious about how you can release your emotions in a primal, safe, and loving way. So that's another tip. Something else that I will offer, and there's so many tips, but another one I'll have is I have a chapter in my book on connecting through healing, because a lot of us think we need to be going on our healing journeys alone. I used to feel like that. I didn't want to share it with anyone. I felt so isolated, so lonely. I felt like no one would ever understand. But I learned that, and I had a calling to like, you know what, maybe you should just like start opening up to people and tell them like what you're experiencing. So I started by just shooting an email off because I was in bed. So I'm like typing from bed to my like trusted group of high school friends. And I was like, guys, you don't know this, but I'm like, basically I've been bedridden for the last several months. Like I haven't shared this with anyone. It's been so difficult. And I was met with so much love and compassion and people who wanting to connect me with these people and talk to this person who had Lyme disease. And I found myself making new connections and just being authentic and real and letting people know this, I was in this place, felt very safe for me. And then when I told them, I was met with so much love and compassion, I took it a step further and I was like, I think I'm going to tell my church community. Like no one knew. Again, met with like so much, like people brought meals to my house. People came to just talk to me. People who had Lyme disease were like, let me help you. I healed. Here's how you can do it. Like, I'll tell you what I did, what worked for you. And just being surrounded by love and inspiration, like that gave me the will to and the hope to heal. And I think that was in and of itself was so powerful. So I have a whole chapter in my book on the importance of connecting with others, like first connecting with yourself, first tapping into your own inner wisdom, which is what I call your authentic power. Get vulnerable with how you're feeling, but then also connecting with others. And what I've learned is that by getting vulnerable and real and having these types of conversations with people like you, my connections have deepened. My life is more fulfilled. I'm more honest with myself and others. And I just feel my true essence is shining through. So that is something else. I mean, I have so many more. I'll stop myself there, but those are some components that have helped in my journey.
Well, we just all need to get your book so then we can get all the tips. I mean, let's face it, that sounds like the best plan to me. So, okay, we have 5 more minutes before you have to go get your kids. I would love to know where people can find you and what parting words, like your biggest takeaway that you really want to leave the listeners with.
Yes. So you can find me by visiting my website, ashleybernardi.com. It's ASHLEYBERNARD as in dog, I.com. So I would love to hear from you. You can learn all about my book there. And you just send me, like, there's a contact me on the page. I'd love to hear, any time from anyone who's read the book. Parting words. Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many. I think my parting words would be like, just for anyone who's listening and who's struggling, like, I hope that my joy and my enthusiasm and passion for healing has shined through today. And I hope it leaves you with hope. That's what I hope for, is that, for anyone going through a hard time, it can be so hard to hold on to that hope. I know I've been there, but hold on to that hope and surround yourself with positive affirmations. I would say, look into the law of attraction. It is possible to manifest your healing. I was there. I have done it. And if I can do it, I believe truly anyone could possibly get there. So those would be my parting words. And hold on to hope. Give yourself permission to feel. Transformation will happen as a result.
Thank you. I need to do that. I need to be better at giving myself permission to feel, as the mom that has to take care of the old dogs, the kids, the parents, the brain injured brother, it's like sometimes I feel like I am the one spinning all the plates, right?
Yeah.
And if I crumble, then everybody else is going to fall right alongside. But I want to add one thing that I wanted to say at the very beginning. When they told you had postpartum depression, I'm thinking it was just all the shit that you were experiencing, all the physical symptoms. Who wouldn't be depressed? And I mean, this is just the feeling I've got. The feeling I've got is that it's just all the physical symptoms that would give you depression, not the fact that you have a new baby. I mean, you're probably just frustrated going, oh my gosh, what's happening? My body's falling apart. I have to take care of these kids, and
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that. And thank you for saying that, because when I was diagnosed with that, I was like, you know what I thought? I was like, thank God I have at least one diagnosis. Thank God. That's like, at that point, I just wanted a label on something, and I wanted something to help me feel better. And if that was it, then so be it. In my heart of hearts, I knew that wasn't the root of the problem, like truly, but I was like, you know what? If this diagnosis is going to validate me getting some more medical help that I need, so be it. I will take any diagnosis at this point, because I was that far gone. But I agree with you. I think that it was people looking at me and saying like, well, yeah, she's depressed. It must be this. And it was like, oh, I'm depressed. Of course I'm depressed. I can't get out of bed. And it just goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, is like being listened to, being an advocate for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. It's a chicken and egg theory, right? Like they think that the postpartum depression came first and then you're experiencing the symptoms, but I'm feeling like it was these symptoms that,
it was. Yeah, it was. And
created that.
It all worked out how it was supposed to. It was, and in my book, I even say this was the gift of Lyme and gift of whatever, if I want to call it the gift of postpartum depression. I am so grateful, because I'm a completely different person today than I was 6 years ago. And I will forever be grateful for that experience. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I hope nobody else has to get there, to have that type of wake up call. For me, it was the one I needed, or I would have never paid attention. I was going 1,000 miles a minute, way too fast, and life needed to knock me off my feet in order to get my attention.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, Ashley, sharing your story. You're lovely. And I like being able to share that same language with people. And I'm hoping that more people that listen to these types of shows, they can realize that their life is so much bigger than what they just see in front of them. So
true. And thank you, Tracy, for creating this beautiful platform to have these types of conversations, because we need so much more of it in the world. And it's just been such a joy to speak with you today. And thank you for the opportunity to share my story.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay, that was an amazing interview. I just so look forward to all of us reading Ashley's book and being able to process the emotions that we've held back for so long. The book is The Authentic Power, Give Yourself Permission, and you can find that on her website, on Amazon, but please go over to her website at ashleybernardi.com. Check out what she does. And for complete show notes, head on over to the blog at highenergygirl.com/show. Go out and make it a great day, everyone. Bye now. This podcast contains the opinion and thoughts of its host and guests. It is intended to provide helpful and informative material on the subjects covered. All statements made on the podcast have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. If the listener requires professional assistance or advice, please contact your personal medical doctor. Both host and guest specifically disclaim any responsibility for any liability, loss, or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence directly or indirectly of the use and application of any of the contents of these episodes. Like I said, this is my opinion and I could be wrong.